Welcome to my Springboot course using Kotlin. In this course, I'll be going over how to create a great foundation to utilize Spring Boot to its fullest potential using Kotlin. So to provide some transparency on this course and what you should expect, I want to give a demo of the funds application using Postman. I'm going to go through each request in Postman and we'll be seeing the endpoints that we expect to build when we go through this course. So the first thing I want to start off with is the authentication flow, right? Sign up and log in. We'll be utilizing Spring Security to handle this for us because we will expect to retrieve a JWT token when a user logs in. And this token is going to be important because all the other endpoints that we want to interact with requires the token to be sent because we want to make sure that the user that is signed up, logged in, authenticated is the proper user that's interacting with the application. We don't want a random stranger to be able to handle your funds, handle your money. We want to make sure that you are the valid user and you retrieve the token to say that you're the valid user. So let's go ahead and start with the sign up. Not sure where you're from, but in my country, you have to be at least 16 years old to create a banking account to handle money or deposit money or withdraw money. You have to be at least 16 years old, and usually that requires a guardian. So in this case, I can already see that this may be wrong, right? When I sign up, I want the first name, last name, email, password, and age. But in this case, the age is showing 15. So let me go ahead and attempt to sign up with this. And we already received our first error, right? We want to make sure that the user or the person signing up is at least 16 years old to create an account. So let's go ahead and change that. But let's go ahead and change something else, right? What if they don't provide an email? They try to be funny. They don't want to be spammed. Not like I'm going to spam them, but they don't want to send their email. They don't trust this funds application. They're not going to send an email with this sign up request. Let's press send again. Well, email cannot be null, right? It can't be empty. It has to be a valid value. So we can see that there's already validation being done, and that's what we're going to handle. With the request is we're going to handle validation with each individual property in this JSON because we want to make sure that our application work as expected and we don't want the user to send random stuff, right? Whether it's intentional or unintentional, because sometimes people don't try to break your application. They just send things that they're not supposed to and then end up breaking your application. So we got to make sure that there's validation being done on each individual property, and we'll learn how to do that in this course. So let's go ahead and create an actual account, right? So everything is valid. We got a first name, we got a last name, we got an email, password, and age. I would hope that if you're creating a password, it's much longer than this, but that's fine. Press send, and we can see that it's created. 201 is the status code, and we should be good to go to login. So in the body, right, it's matching the email that we provided here, and it's matching the password. And when we press login, we retrieve a token, right? We have a token that we can utilize in our request, right? So anything that has to do with us when it comes to getting a transaction or creating an account, like this token needs to be provided. And using uh, a script here, I'm able to set the token that we retrieved from this response to a variable in Postman called JWT. And now every single time I send a request for the future request, I will inject the JWT token, and I'll show that soon. So let's go to get transactions, right? You have an account, you logged in. Now we want to retrieve all the transactions that we sent through this through request, right? But we realize we haven't really saved, or we haven't deposited anything, we haven't withdrawn anything, so we shouldn't have any transactions. But I still want to go ahead and try that out. But you'll see here in the header section, you have an authorization header with a value of bearer and the variable that I just provided. And if I hover over, you can see that the current value is the token that we retrieved during login. So we see that it's holding a valid JWT token. And if I go into the body here, really, I'm not supposed to be utilizing any JSON, right? It can be just straight up empty, or you can put none here. We're just trying to retrieve transactions associated to this account, associated to this token, right? Because this token that we retrieved during login is going to be associated to the user that logged in. So we want to retrieve all the transactions associated to the user based on the token. So let's go ahead and send that. And we have no transactions. So it is a valid request, but there are no transactions. So it's going to be an empty list. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to get my accounts, right? Same process, right? The headers have to have authorization header with the JWT token. But by default, when a user signs up, I automatically create an account for them. So if I press send, they should already have a checking account already available with a balance of 0, right? But you can see that it's created at, you know, on October 12th, updated at, the same time because it was created and updated essentially at the same time, right? And account type is checking, balance is 0, the name, the name of, the user, the type of the account, and a UUID just to make it unique, and the ID of the specific account. Now, going back to the above request of creating an account, we can go ahead and create a savings account, and we can go ahead and create a checkings account. So to do that, all you got to do is go ahead and press send here, and we're going to go ahead and create a savings account, right? Because we hit the savings endpoint, right? Send a post request to the savings endpoint, and it's going to create a savings account with a balance of 0. And if we want to create a checking account, another one, we can go ahead and press send here, and it's being sent to the account / checking, and it's going to go ahead and create a checkings account with a balance of 0. Now, handling deposits, right? Because when we go ahead and get accounts, we should now see that we have multiple accounts now. We have 3 accounts, and they're all unique, based on the name, and just based on the IDs as well. But the balance is all 0. I want to make sure that I want to add some money to my account, so I have another request that, or another endpoint that handles deposits, right? And that's going to the transaction / deposits endpoint. And we can specify the account that we want to deposit to and the amount we want to deposit to the account. So in this case, I have $150. I want to deposit that amount to the specific account, which is 1, right? This is the account that was created by default. If we go into, getting the accounts, we can see that the ID here is 1. So that's the one I want to send money to this checking account right here. Right now the balance is 0. We're going to change that. Now, how do I know that this user is valid? And honestly, when it comes to deposits, it should be fine for anybody to deposit into your account, because who doesn't want more money? It's really the withdrawals that's an issue. But here we still want to send an authorization header that sends the token on who's trying to deposit money to this account. Uh, but here we're saying, okay, we want to deposit to this account of 150. If I press send, you see that the ID of the account is 1. The amount now is 150, or this is actually the transaction that occurred, right? So the ID of the transaction is 1. The amount is 150. The email is the email associated to the user that did the transaction, and the transaction type is deposit, and when this transaction was created, and it provides the default time of when it was actually created and updated at, which at this time is both at the same time. Now, if we go to transactions and we retrieve the transactions again, it's not empty anymore. We can see that what occurred. Someone did the deposit. This email did the deposit, because you have to be signed up to do a deposit, and it's going to associate that user that did the deposit here, right? The email is going to be associated here, and the type of deposit, or the type of transaction that was done, which is deposit. And now we are able to see all the transactions that occur, for our account. Now, the next one I want to do is withdraw, right? We have to provide, the token here, right? The authorization header, and we had to provide the token. And I want to attempt to withdraw $500. Let's see what happens. Not enough funds. Not able to do that. But if I want to retrieve 100, well, I could do that, right? And that's another transaction, right? The transaction type is going to be withdraw, and the ID is 2, right? It's incrementing each time. Every transaction is unique, and the amount that was done. So if I go back to get transactions, I can see that, okay, someone deposited 150, and someone withdrawed, same person though, emails associated to that person. Someone withdrawed 100, right? These are all the transactions that occurred for this specific user that's logged in, which is specified by this token. And if I go into get accounts, right, I should see 50, right? The balance is now 50 because I deposited 150 and I withdrew 100. So now there's 50. Simple math. Now, handling transfer is its own thing, right? So what if I want to transfer money from one account to another, right? I remember I have 3 accounts, right? I have this checking, but maybe, I just got this paycheck and it was deposited into the checking account. I want to move it over to a savings account. I want to move it over to this second account over here, the savings account, which has an ID of 2. Well, I can do that. I can go ahead and, from account 1, transfer over to account 2, and I don't want to transfer over everything. And let me transfer over 25. All right, let me send that over. Boom. Third transaction type is transfer, and we're showing that it's going from the first account to the second account. And who did it? Well, I did it. The current logged in user, which is has the email of geo@gmail.com. And the amount, well, it was $25, right? Now, what if I tried to do something much higher, right? I want to transfer over $55. Well, not enough funds, right? You got to get your money up. Can't do that. So now if I go ahead and get the accounts, I can see now that we have, the first account still has $25 in it, and now the second account has $25 as well. But then we have this third checking, which has $0. It's kind of useless. I don't really need it. So let me go ahead and delete that account. So I can go ahead and um, delete that account by just specifying the ID of the account, going and sending a delete request, and no content. When it comes to delete, it's going to send it to a 4. But if I go back to get accounts, well, it's gone. It's deleted. So now we just have 2 accounts. If I want to go ahead and create another one, I could go ahead and create a checking or go ahead and create another savings if I want to. But I think 2 is fine for now. Now the next one is handling send, right? Say for instance, if you've heard of things like Zelle or Cash App, you want to send to another user. Well, I need to create another account. So let me go ahead and create an account. I'm going to call this TWG. I'm going to say that I'm 24. I'm going to say the first name is Bob. Last name is Test. Email is twg@gmail.com. And the password is, I'm going to keep it the same password. You shouldn't keep it the same password. And I'm going to create this account. So now you can see that it was created. It got a 201 request. And by default, and I'm going to log in with this account. Go ahead and put TWG here. Log in. Is going to retrieve that token, and just based on the script that I have here, it's going to set the token as what I just received as a response. If I go ahead and get the accounts, we can see that the only account associated to this account is the one that was created by default, which currently has a value of 0. So now if I log back into the other account, which is geo@gmail.com, press save, get the accounts, right? I want to transfer over some money to account, which we saw has an ID of 4. So just like Zelle, just like Cash App, I want to make sure that I send to this specific email, right? And from, let me see, we're going to get it from account number 1 or from my checking account. We're going to send $15, right? Maybe we went to the bar, got a drink. Well, I want to handle that send from, and I already forgot the ID. I'm going to say 1, handle send from account 1 and send $15, send it over. And we did just that, right? It's going to go by default because by default, when a user signs up, they're going to have a default account to handle transfers, right? So in this case, they only have 1 account. So their default account is going to be 4. So when it comes to handling sends, well, that money is going to be sent to that default account. So if I log back into twg@gmail.com and I get account, we'll see $15, right? So we're able to send money to different accounts to different users, no problem. So that is the flow when it comes to, a user signing up into an application, getting transactions, creating an account, creating a checking account, handling deposit, withdrawals, transfers, deletions of accounts, sending money to other accounts, getting information about our accounts, or even getting a information regarding a specific account. We can do that by an ID, and we can get information about a specific account. So we have all these things. Now I'm going to save the last 2 of getting reward points and getting rewards towards the end, because this is going to be utilizing a separate application. We're going to be utilizing Kafka to send information to a topic where our application or our second application is going to retrieve from that topic and calculate reward points. But we'll handle that in a separate portion. Let's get started on building that. So the demo was promising, but here's a summary of what this course will cover. We'll connect our application to a Postgres database. We'll learn how to create and utilize entities, repositories, services, and controllers. You'll learn how to handle errors using global exception handling, especially because of the fact that errors are bound to happen and you need to know how to handle them. You'll learn how to utilize Spring Security to make sure only users that are authorized and authenticated with a JWT token will be able to access protected routes. You'll learn how to send emails to users. This is perfect for sign up or confirmations. And towards the end, we'll also be learning how to communicate between applications utilizing Kafka. So we'll be creating a Kafka topic so that we'll send messages to the topic while another application consumes it. So we're going to be covering a lot, but this is a summary of what this course will cover. And I'd even get to talk about transactions and how we're going to make our application consistent, or making sure that our data is consistent, um, and how to handle those cases where users may try to send requests simultaneously, and things like JMeter, how we can test it. So there's a lot that this will cover, but this is a great summary of what you will learn in the course. So what will you need? Well, you're going to need Java, right? I would recommend the latest version, but a couple versions below is fine as well. In IDE, I recommend IntelliJ, but you use whatever you're comfortable with. You should have Docker installed because we'll be utilizing Docker to run a Postgres container, which we'll use to connect our Springboot application to the running Postgres container. A database graphical interface is optional, but it is nice to have. I'll be using dbeaver, or you could also use pgadmin. Some Spring knowledge would be great, but I'll explain as many things as I can as I go through it. Some Java or Kotlin knowledge will be great as well. Um, I do have a separate course on Kotlin, so if you need like a refresher, you can go visit that. Some database knowledge. This is not a database course, but I'll explain as many things as I can as I go. Why is this course important? Well, Java was primarily used in the past with Spring Boot, but now Kotlin has begun to take precedence within a lot of companies like Amazon, Google, and DoorDash. Hopefully, by the end of this course, you'll be able to take what you learn and use it for professional projects or your own personal projects. I know my company was the one that started to transition of using Java and going to Kotlin. So I see it in Fortune 500 companies all the time of people making that transition from Java to Kotlin, not only for mobile applications, but for actual APIs. So this is the funds app flow. I want to just provide a diagram that shows the flow on how we're going to be structuring our application. So we're going to have a client, and that can be whatever, right? It could be Postman, it could be your React application, it could be whatever. Whatever is going to be sending the request is going to be sent to our application. Now, before the request gets deeper into our application, that request is going to go through our JWT authentication and authorization filter. This is going to make sure that, first of all, are you trying to reach out to a protected endpoint? If you're not trying to reach out to a protected endpoint, then it's fine. Go ahead and send that request to our application, and we'll try to return information if information is available, right? So whether it's login, whether it's sign up, those are not protected. We want users to sign up and we want users to log in. That's fine. But if it's any of our protected endpoints, we expect a user to send a token. We saw that in the demo, how we expect a JWT token to be sent. So if this filter is going to take that token, first of all, check if it's even there. If it's not there, then go ahead and let the client know that you're not able to use this endpoint. You don't have a token. And second of all, if you do send a token, but it's not valid, well, we will let the client know that it is not a valid token. Go ahead and log in like you're supposed to, or sign up like you're supposed to, log in, get that token, and send it over. But if it is a valid token, then go ahead and send that request over to our application. Then we can begin the process of getting what you need or doing what you want us to do. So you can see that the arrows flow in and it also flows out. So the first thing it's going to reach out to is the controller, which houses all the endpoints. The controller is going to reach out to the service, which handles the logic and sometimes handling the validation. And based on the data that we need, the service is going to communicate with the repository, because the repository layer is what handles the communication between the application and the DB instance, which in this case is going to be Postgres. So you can see that the repository is going to be pointing towards the Postgres database, and it's going to run the query, and then it's going to return that information back to the repository. Then that repository is going to get that information, return it back to the service. We can clean up the information that we got from the repository in the service, structure it in the way that we want to, send it back to the controller, and the controller will send that information back to the client if there's any information available. And then right above it, we have models, which is going to help us structure how we expect the data to look like. So we're going to have different things, like we're going to have request objects, right? How we expect the request to look like. We're going to have entities, which is going to be how we expect our data to look like in the Postgres database, right? Or how our table is going to look like, how it's going to be structured, how our columns going to look like, the type of columns. That's all going to be within that model section, right? And we're going to be able to use those models throughout each layer, right? The controller layer, the service layer, the repository layer, all of them will be utilizing the models. And around that, right, you can see the blue box around everything is going to be the global exception handler, which handles any issues that may arise throughout this process in the application. So if there's any exceptions, then the global exception handler will make sure to capture that exception and structure it in a way that doesn't break our application, and also structure in a way that we can send back to the user that they understand, right? So that the client understands what to do, like what occurred. Maybe it might have been a validation error, like we saw in the demo. Then we got to let the user know that, okay, that validation or that request that you sent, the structure is not correct. So go ahead and fix that. Or it might be an internal issue where it's an internal server error. We gotta let the user know that, okay, our application is not working as expected right now. Return a 500, but don't send a whole bunch of information that the client does not understand or might scare the client, right? You have to make sure that we send a message that the client understands. So that's the global exception handler piece. And I already talked about the Postgres DB. That's on the outside. Our repository is going to communicate back and forth with it, send the requests or send the queries that we'll need to get information from the DB, and the DB will return that information back to the repository. And then on the bottom, we have that topic, right? We talked about Kafka. So that topic is going to be where we send messages to. So our funds application, the central application, is going to produce messages, right? I'm going to create a producer on the funds application, the main funds application, and it's going to send information to a topic, right? A topic is going to be where our messages are housed, and we're going to have a reward service that consumes messages from that topic, right? So one application produces while another application consumes, right? And we can have multiple applications and we can put them inside of a consumer group. But in this case, it's just going to be one consumer, one application that's going to be consuming. And this reward service is going to handle calculating reward points. So if you have a bank account, right, whether it's, any big bank account or even a small one, usually they have a reward service, right? If you spend a certain amount of money on your credit card, if you buy certain things, whether you're going to buy groceries or going to do gas, you may accumulate points. But in our application, if you do certain things like transferring money or sending money over to somebody else, you accumulate points. And every single time you do those actions, I'm going to send a message to that topic. And from the reward service, I'm going to consume messages from that topic and calculate how much reward that user will get, right? So say for instance, I did a transfer and I got, the amount was $100, right? Then I'll get a reward point based on, let's say, 2% of that transaction amount. So if I did $100 transaction, then I'll get 2 reward points. And all of that will be calculated in the reward service, the rewards application. And that will be consumed from the topic, right? Produce the transaction to the topic, consume that transaction from the topic, calculate that amount of reward points, and store it in its own DB. And honestly, I should really have an arrow that points to a Postgres database. But in our mind, this is all going to be calculated. And now, when the main application needs that reward points, it will send a request using an HTTP request to our reward service, and will return how many points that specific user has accumulated while using our application. So that's the full flow. It's a lot going on, but this is just to provide a diagram of how everything's going to flow in our application. So this is the funds app functionality. This is going to be when a user is signed up and logged in, a user will be able to create an account. We saw that a user can create either a checking or a savings account. A user can deposit money into a specific account, whether it's their checkings or their savings account. They can withdraw from a specific account. They can transfer money between accounts that they own. They can send money to other accounts, right? So if you know somebody based on their email, you can send over information to their default account, right? Because every account is going to have a default account that accepts, um, you know, people sending money to them. So if they only have one account, then that usually will be their default account. And you'll be able to view transactions. So when you go onto your banking app, you usually see all the transactions that occur. So whether somebody sent you money, whether somebody or whether you withdraw money or somebody deposited money, you'll be able to see all those transactions that you want associated to a account or through all your accounts. So that is the functionality of the funds application. So here I am on the Spring Initializer website. Let's go ahead and start by getting a bare bones Spring Boot application. And the Spring Initializers is going to allow us to create that, but also specify the dependencies that we'll need from the jump. So we can specify some of the settings that we'll need for this bare bones Spring Boot application. First is the type of project, right? I usually just keep it at Maven. I like Maven a lot. I don't really care for Gradle, but you could select Gradle if you want. Gradle, Kotlin is here, or even Gradle Groovy, but I'm gonna select Maven. The language is gonna be Kotlin because this is a Kotlin Spring Boot course. I'm gonna keep the Spring Boot version to 3.3.4, but you have other options here as well. For the group, I'm just gonna call it com.twg. And for the artifact and the name, because they're all going to be tied together, I'm just going to call this funds app. So you can see that it's going to be com.twg funds app. And essentially that's going to be the structure of the packaging in our application. And then for the description, I'm just going to put this is a funds app by TWG. Cool. And then the packaging will be, a jar file, and then the specific Java version that you want. I'll keep it at 17, but if you have 23 or 21 or any higher versions, right, depending on when you're watching it, then you can select that as well. But I'll keep it at 17. Now, the dependencies we'll need for this is going to be first Spring Web, right? This is going to allow us to build our RESTful application, right? So you can even see a little description here. Build web, including RESTful applications using Spring MVC, and has Apache Tomcat embedded, right, to spin up our application, right, to have it running on a specific port, all ingrained inside our application, which is awesome. So we'll select that. Then we'll do Postgres, the Postgres driver. If we don't have this, we're unable to connect to our instance. So it has to know how to connect with, so we're going to need this driver. Then we're going to utilize Spring JPA. This is going to allow us to create our entities. So essentially allow us to create classes that will create tables in our Postgres database and a whole bunch of other useful methods, right, to communicate with our database. So we're going to need this Spring Data JPA. So yeah, for now, these are the three things that you're going to need: Spring Web, Postgres driver, and the Spring Data JPA. This is just the dependencies we'll need to start off, but there's going to be more dependencies that we're going to need towards the future. But this is just to start off the application. Once you press generate, it's going to create a zip folder based on the name that you provided. In my case, it's going to be funds app. And inside of it, it's going to contain all the files you need for the Spring Boot application based off the information you provided here. And what we can do is obviously open up the zip folder, right, because it's compressed right now, and then open that up in your IDE, and we can get started from there.